Hello everyone, it's Melly here, just coming with a quick tutorial to show you how to make and sew on piping. So you may be making my carry round bag, or you may just be wanting to know how to do piping for another project, and I hope that this can help you out a great deal. So what we have here is a piece of fabric here. Now I'm just pretending that I am creating a small little bag here that's going to have piping around the edges. So that is my interfaced fabric there. I have a strip cut on the bias. So this here is about the length that I'm going to require to go around my circle, and I've just basically cut a piece of pre-made bias tape to the width that I want. So right now on the screen it will be showing you the maths equation, how to figure out what size you want your strip of fabric. So that's the width that you want your strip of fabric, in order to ensure that you have the correct seam allowance. So I've already done that, and I've cut my strip to the correct width that I need to work with the cord that I'm using. Now you can just use standard basic piping cord. I've got a little bit of a fancier cord here today, that's just what I had on hand, but just standard piping cord. Now it depends what size you get based on how thick you want your little piping area, the filled area of your piping to be. So anywhere usually between 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, and to be honest with you, I think this cord is somewhere kind of right in the middle of those two. So we have our length of cord, which is just slightly longer than my length of fabric, and all we're going to do now first is attach those together. So we're just going to fold this piece of fabric in half and put the cord right in the middle. And then we're just going to match those raw edges together. Now I'm just using pins here, but you can use clips if you have clips. I'm just using pins because that's what I have on hand right now. And I will just fast forward this bit so that you don't have to sit here watching me do this, but I'm just going to go along this length and pin it all in place. So as you can see, I have now pinned all of that cord in place, and as you can see, I've done it fairly close together just to make it a little bit easier for me as I'm sewing this together, and just to get those seam allowances accurate. Now the next thing you want to do is make sure you install a zipper foot into your sewing machine. With your zipper foot, you're then going to just go ahead and sew the piping into place. So what we're just going to do is start at that end spot, and we're just going to sew all the way down. Now you can use a fairly large stitch for this, as it's not going to be your final stitching. So I've sewn all of that in place, as you can see there, and we have our piece of piping to use. Now at this point, if you've done your calculation correct, this seam allowance should be the seam allowance that you're intending to use for your project. If it's a little bit too long, you can trim it at this point. So once we've got that together, to just trim off that first end. It's our starting point. And what we're going to do now is we're going to sew this onto our item that we're wanting the piping seam to go into. I'll just get that all pinned in place, and I'll just put that on fast forward while I do that. Okay, so I've just pinned the first little section. I generally tend to just place it where I want it as I'm going, but I just want to show you that it is a good idea to pin it in place if you want to make sure you have that accuracy and you don't want to work on the fly like I do. Now we're going to start sewing a little bit from that end, so we don't want to sew that end down just yet. That's going to help us with our joining the two pieces later. So maybe start around 3/4 of an inch away from that to start your sewing. So I'm just going to start around there. Now I'm going to put my needle down first. So I'm just going to take that first pin out, and again I'm going to do a little bit of securing backwards and forwards there, and now I'm just going to sew this piping onto my piece of fabric. Okay, so I've just gotten fairly close to my starting point here. So I'm just going to secure off my stitches at that point. And then I'll show you here, I probably ended about an inch before my starting point. So now we're going to figure it out that we get a really lovely join at the end of our piping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this piping about, we left about 3/4 of an inch there. So I'm going to say about an inch overlap, all right? No need to be too accurate, just make sure that you're getting a good amount overlap. And I'm going to cut the piping there. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to unpick this section of piping. So I'm just going to start there and I'm just going to unpick probably again about an inch, maybe an 1.25 inches at the end of that piping. So now what I'm going to do is open that up and I'm going to see where I need how long I need my piping to be. So I've just got a little fabric marker and I'm just going to mark where that cord ends, the first cord ends, where its meeting point will be on this cord. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut the cord there. So shorten the cord by that amount. So now what I want to do is I'm just going to use my fingers, I'm just going to finger press and I'm going to fold in that end. So hopefully you can see what I've done here. I've got that nice finger pressed edge. I'm putting that down with my starting point out of the way. And then I'm going to lay the starting point inside there and get it to the place where those two pieces of cord are meeting. And then I'm going to fold that bit over again. So then we just need to make sure that everything's neat. Okay, so pull it nice and tightly, get it nicely into shape. And we've just got that little bit of folded over fabric. Make sure it's all fitting in there nicely again, and then we're going to sew that last little section of the curve. So starting back before we finished our stitches, make sure it's all fitting together nicely. And then I'm going to sew that last section in place. Okay, so you can see how that's all nicely sewn in place. And now the piping is going all the way around. Now you just use that the same as you would any other piece of fabric. So when you're sewing that together, obviously put your other fabric right sides together with that, and then you're going to sew along your seam allowance. Again, you will be making sure you're using a zipper foot, and you're going to want to get as close as you can into that piping. If you find that these bits are curling up a little bit like mine are there, you can choose to just tack those down. So I can just quickly go around with the same foot, no need to change anything, and I can just make sure that that's sewn around. As you can see, that just holds it down a little bit more. So now we just have a standard piece that we're going to continue sewing with, and when we sew those two seams together, obviously our piping will create nicely around that seam. So I hope that's helped, and I hope that you will now enjoy making some piping to use it in your projects. It really is a really nice finishing touch, and once you've done it, you'll be adding it to everything, to your cushions, to all your bags. It really just does give that beautiful finishing touch, and it's really not that difficult to do at all. It's just a little extra step, but it's an extra step that's really worth it and just makes a complete difference to your end product. Enjoy your sewing. Have a good day. Bye.